Welcome to Roughing It with Ruth, the channel where everything is a bit rough around the edges. Making a mistake when you're out on the trail is such a terrible feeling. It can completely destroy your entire trip, even if it's quite a small mistake. So this is what I do when I make a mistake out on the trail. If you have your own tips about how to deal with making a mistake out on the trail, then please leave them in the comments below, because as always, we can all learn together and we can all learn from each other's experiences. So the very first thing that you have to do is you have to identify that there is something wrong. You've made a mistake. Maybe you've gotten lost. Maybe you've packed too much gear in your bag and it's too heavy. Maybe you haven't trained sufficiently for the hike that you're doing and you're experiencing a lot of physical issues. Anyway, there are so many things that can go wrong out on the trail, and the first step is to acknowledge that there is a problem. Now, what's quite important at this juncture for me is to avoid assigning responsibility for the mistake or the problem or whatever it is that's going wrong. At this point, that is completely unhelpful. It's not going to make any difference at all. So all you need to do is establish what the problem is. This might involve you experiencing pain in your foot and stopping to take off your shoe to examine your foot to see what is going on, and then realizing that you forgot to cut your toenails before you went on your hike. Now, the very next thing that I do after I've established that there is a problem is that I try to stay calm. And the best way that I've found of doing this is to just stop and take several really deep breaths before doing anything else. Then the third thing that you might need to do if you're hiking with other people is communicate to other people that something has gone wrong. Also, try not to be defensive or antagonistic or blame anybody. Just be very calm and polite and tell everyone else exactly what is going on. Then the fourth thing, which is actually the most important thing, is to deal with what has happened. This starts by identifying what the solutions are. So you forgot to cut your toenails, you've communicated to your group that your feet are in pain because your toenails are too long. And now one of the possible solutions is that somebody has a nail clipper and you can cut your toenails, and that's great. It's always a good idea to look at several different solutions here, because you might not immediately hit on the optimal one for your situation. So one of the solutions might be that you really, really wish that you were just back at home in your slippers where long toenails are not a problem. But that solution doesn't really have a whole lot of merit unless you can teleport back home without taking another step on the trail. And then the last part of dealing with what has happened is to choose a solution and implement it. Then the next step for me only takes place once I no longer have a problem to deal with. Once the mistake has been fixed, or the problem has been resolved, or there's no longer some sort of issue that needs to be dealt with, I will then move on to this step. And this step is establishing why this happened. And the reason why I feel it's very important to only do this at this stage in the proceedings is because in order for this to be beneficial, you need to be really scientific and not emotional. And when you're dealing with a problem, you're in pain, or you're tired, or you're scared, or you're sitting in the cold and wet, that is not a good time to be trying to think about why things went wrong. It's a good time to be trying to think about how you're going to help yourself so that you're not experiencing physical and emotional and mental stress. So now you're back at home in bed, all warm, and you're not stressed out, and now you can think back about why exactly you made these mistakes. Why were you walking with those long toenails? It's also important here to be really, really honest with yourself. And it's also important to remember that problems are often caused by several different factors. So don't get too obsessed with trying to pin what has happened on one specific cause. And then the most important thing that I'm going to say in this entire video has to do with blame. It is not constructive to blame yourself or other people or items that you have with you for what has happened. And the reason why it's not constructive is because it doesn't lead anywhere. Now you're blaming yourself, or you're blaming someone else, or you're blaming this failed piece of equipment. All that does is continue to generate negative feelings inside you. And in fact, the act of blaming anything, including yourself, is actually a way to avoid dealing with the hardest part of making a mistake, which is to figure out how it's not going to happen again. How are you going to learn from the experience? And that is the final point in this video. When you make a mistake, the best thing about it is that you learn from it and you figure out exactly what it was that you did wrong so that you don't do it again. And what I've found for myself is that getting to the point of being able to define how I am going to change things so that I don't make the same mistake again can only really happen once I've gone through the whole process of everything else that I've just discussed in the video. But once again, this is just my own personal experience. If you have some other tips about how you deal with making mistakes on the trail, then please feel free to share them in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more.